Welcome back to America Talks Live. I'm Miranda Khan. President Trump reacts on Twitter after LaVar Ball made comments some are calling ungrateful. He downplayed the release of his son after LaAngelo Ball was arrested in China on shoplifting charges. President Trump tweeted twice, first saying that he should have left him in jail and then calling the father very ungrateful. Ball and the other two UCLA players were suspended indefinitely from the team for allegedly shoplifting while they were in China. That tweet prompted this response then from CNN's Brian Stelter.
I think it's immature at best, Fred, but it's really race baiting at worst. That's going to be debated. That's going to be argued about. But I want to put that on the table. It sure looks like race baiting to a lot of people.
A staff writer for The Atlantic also tweeted the president picks fights with black people to stir up support from racists. Meanwhile, Trump says the NFL should suspend Marshawn Lynch if he kneels or sits during the national anthem again. He tweeted that it was disrespectful of the Oakland Raiders player to stand for the Mexican national anthem and sit during the U.S. one. ESPN reports that Lynch sat for the anthem during every game this year. And that's where we're going to welcome in today's political panel. Joining us now, conservative columnist at townhall.com, Erich Reimer, along with Democratic strategist Robin Biro. He was also a former Obama regional campaign director. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Great to be on.
Thank you, Miranda.
So, Erich, let's start with you. Is this race baiting, or is the president just merely expressing what he views as being ungrateful and disrespectful?
I think it's just incredible how every single Trump tweet becomes its own news cycle. I think we're all very used to the president speaking his mind on Twitter. And I mean, on the merits of this case, I mean, the fact is that President Trump made a personal appeal to Chinese President Xi Jinping to release the players and save them from what could have been a very tough life in a communist labor camp. And so I think definitely the players should be grateful. I mean, I think it's sad how every action the president takes, no matter if it's good or bad, becomes a political issue where opponents of the president always try to find some way to attack it and deride it. And I think in the end, at the moment, I mean, this whole conflict right now. I mean, there's so many more important policy issues to be talking about right now, rather than who's right or who's wrong in this, such as tax reform, Obamacare reform, etc. And so I think I think many Americans are I think many Americans want to get back to those issues instead of the constant tweet wars.
Robin, we are running out of time, but I'm going to let you go ahead and start now. And if we need to, we'll continue after the break. But I want to get your reaction to this.
Actually, I really agree with most everything that Erich just said. I think race baiting may be a stretch, but I do think, like Erich said, that these become their own news cycles. And the president, I do think this is incredibly immature. The players themselves already apologized and thanked the president. President Trump, though, is just taking a fight with one of the players' fathers. I think that's ridiculous and immature at best. So
you agree. All right, Erich, Robin, don't go away. We still have a lot more to discuss after the break. Erich mentioned taxes. We're going to talk about that. President Trump says he wants to get tax reform done by Christmas. Christmas, he says. But is that a realistic deadline? We're going to ask our political panel to weigh in after the break. Some of the obstacles that could be in the way of that. We're going to talk about that. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show about the state and local tax deductions. That seems to be a sticking point. But the president had one thing in there that he really wanted in that bill, and now he's saying, well, it doesn't have to be in there. We're going to talk about that after the break. Welcome back to America Talks Live. I'm your host, Miranda Khan. President Trump talked tax reform during a cabinet meeting that he had earlier today. He praised the House for passing its bill and is now calling on the Senate to do the same so he can give the American people tax reform by Christmas.
I want to congratulate the House of Representatives for passing a vital and historic tax cut last week, and I'm very hopeful the Senate will do the same very soon. We're going to give the American people a huge tax cut for Christmas. Hopefully that will be a great, big, beautiful Christmas present.
Speaking of beautiful, let's bring back our beautiful political panel. We have conservative columnist Erich Reimer sticking around, along with the Democratic strategist Robin Biro. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Always love his adjectives there. Robin, one of the sticking points in this bill is the idea of repealing the Obamacare mandate, something the president said he wanted, but according to the White House is now open to leaving it out. What do you think changed his mind?
Look, there's going to have to be compromise. They just compromised on the home mortgage interest deduction, which I was very happy to see, because that would have killed the real estate market. And the National Association of Realtors and the National Home Builders Association lobbied against that hard. So I'm glad that that's gone, because that would have really hurt the American public. The same thing with repealing the individual mandate. So I'm glad that I'm really, truly glad that they're taking steps to compromise and look more carefully at how this will affect the American public, not just the wealthy, not just corporations. This is actually what I wanted to see, because Donald Trump was talking about huge tax cuts for Americans. But that's only for Americans making more than $440,000. Middle Americans that are making $90,000 and less are getting about 1.1%. So, I mean, it is a Christmas gift, but I would not call it a huge savings and a huge Christmas gift, Miranda.
So, Eric, do you agree with that? Are we getting, some of us getting smaller Christmas gifts, maybe not coal, but smaller Christmas gifts this year?
I mean, I think the heart of tax reform, or the tax reform bill as passed, is that it's meant to spur economic growth, create new corporate investment, bring corporate money from overseas back here at home, and through that create the kind of growth that leads to higher paychecks, more jobs, more innovation, and that leads to more just a rising tide for everybody. And I think overall, definitely on the Obamacare mandate, I think no matter what, it's very important for congressional Republicans and President Trump to get some kind of legislation passed and to give Republican voters a reason to turn out in 2018. And I think if they have to put aside the current Obamacare reform efforts for now, I think that is a worthwhile sacrifice, because even though Obamacare needs reform, I think the benefits of this tax bill from an economic growth standpoint for middle-class Americans, as well as politically for congressional Republicans, are just so important, and it just has to get done.
So it sounds like it's not a make or break for you. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, as you both know, is the first Republican to declare his opposition to this bill, although several others have voiced concern. He says it doesn't do enough to cut business taxes for partnerships and corporations. And now the Businesses for Responsible Tax Reform, that's a coalition of progressive small business leaders, seems to agree with that. In fact, it plans to launch a six-figure TV campaign opposing this bill, arguing that it actually balloons the deficit. Robin, how much of an obstacle could this be for Republicans looking to get this, again, passed before Christmas?
Oh my gosh, Miranda. All studies do indicate that this will balloon the deficit. So, and the Republicans have been crying out about this for decades. I remember under Bill Clinton's administration, them railing against the national deficit increases. So, you know, this is a big problem. I think that it's good that they're launching this TV campaign because Americans do need to know what's at stake. And we've got to get more relief. I forgot one thing in the earlier segment. This bill still leaves in a 2% increase for people that are low income earners. So I would be willing to call that poor tax, and I have a big problem with that. So I definitely understand this senator's opposition, and they're going to have to continue to refine this, work on it, compromise, and make it better, deliver on his campaign promises to help not just the middle class, but also the lower class Americans, the lower income Americans, Miranda.
Well, it sounds like they're going to be tweaking this quite a bit. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit if we can, actually a lot. Another woman is now accusing Democratic Senator Al Franken of misconduct. She claims Franken grabbed her buttocks while the two were taking a picture together at a Minnesota State Fair back in 2010. This just came out today. Franken was in office when this happened. The woman tweeted that she felt violated and thanked Franken's first accuser, you may recall Leanne Tweeden, for sharing her story. Also, all of this comes as Roy Moore continues to deal with his own sexual misconduct allegations. President Trump says he will not campaign for him. The White House Legislative Affairs Director says President Trump has some serious concerns. We're going to ask our panel to weigh in and what the future may hold for both of these men when America Talks Live continues. Welcome back to America Talks Live. We want to welcome back our panel, Erich Reimer and Robin Biro. Thanks, gentlemen, for sticking around. So right before we went to break, we talked about Roy Moore, the president's response, also the latest accusations facing Senator Al Franken. This is a very short segment, so I want to give both of you enough time to respond to this. So I'm going to give you each a minute there. Let's start with you, Erich. I want to get your reaction to what the future holds for both of these men, Moore and Senator Franken.
You know, with all of this, I'm just reminded of General Kelly's speech a few weeks ago at the White House, where he talked about how we've lost respect in this country for what is sacred, and among those he named women. And I think the past few weeks have definitely brought that out deeply in our public culture. And I think that Franken and whatever is going on with Moore, I think these are less unique cases, but more symptomatic of our culture. And I think both Democrats and Republicans need to work together to try to raise up our culture, teach more character and virtue, and just build a better culture. And I think both sides need to work together on it.
To work together, but you're not necessarily saying whether or not they should step down. Robin, should these men keep their positions?
You know, when the first accuser came out and Al Franken immediately apologized and the victim accepted the apology, I was somewhat indifferent. But now that there's a second accusation and Al Franken seems surprised, frankly, that she was offended, I do most definitely think he needs to step down at this point. I will agree with Erich that we need to work across party lines. This transcends politics. This isn't Hollywood. This is just part of our culture. But it's completely unacceptable. So yes, he's got to step down, and there's no place for Roy Moore. I hope to God that he does not survive this election.
Robin Biro, Erich Reimer, thank you so much for your time today. Pleasure to have both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And have a wonderful Thanksgiving. All right, Newsmax Now host Bill Tucker is going to join us right after the break to tell us what's in store later this afternoon coming up on Newsmax Now, because there's going to be a special edition, a 2-hour edition. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching America Talks Live. You can always weigh in on the conversation on any of the topics that we've been discussing today by going to newsmaxtv.com. What do you think? Should Moore step down? What about Al Franken? Should Democrats and Republicans work together to fix this culture?